using the quadratic formula. You can definitely use the song. I'll post a link about the quadratic formula. It's just a good way to remember it. But it's this whole formula here. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So if I were to do this one here, well, first you got to make sure it's in standard form. So here it is in standard form, it's equal to 0. So I'm going to have a is equal to 2, b is equal to negative 5, and then c is equal to positive 3. So set it up, so it's going to be x equals to negative of negative b. So like before, when we had negative already, it's going to be negative of negative, or you can just put it as positive. Then it's going to be plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 5 squared, minus 4a, and then c. And then it's all over 2 times a. So what you're doing here for the quadratic formula is you're just going to replace each of those letters in the formula with the value that we find. So once we do that, we have this whole thing. We're just going to simplify it. I like to simplify it bit by bit. So I'll deal with this negative 5. That's going to turn into positive 5. Then here I'll have inside the square root negative 5 squared. So that'll be 25. And then I'll do 4 times 2 times 3. So that'll be 24. And on the bottom, we'll have 4. So now we have 5 plus or minus the square root of 25 minus 24 all over 4. Simplify it a little bit, I can subtract the 25 and 24. So it'll be 5 plus or minus the square root of 4 divided by 4. I'm going to bring this back up here. So the square root of 1, that's just going to be 1. So it's going to be 5 plus or minus 1 over 4. And so I'm going to split this up with the plus or minus. So I either have 5 minus 1 over 4, and then I also have 5 plus 1 over 4. So that's just going to become 4 over 4, and then 6 over 4. So simplify that a little bit, and these will be your solutions. So it is a lot. Seems like a lot because it is. But you just got to do it step by step. And this is one way you could find your solutions. So I'm going to do another one. If you need to pause or rewatch, you're welcome to do so. But moving on, here for b, again, make sure it's in standard form. It's equal to 0, so that's good. Everything's on one side. So my a here is going to be negative 3, b is positive 2, and then c is 7. So here, again, set up the formula. So x equals negative of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So make sure you have it set up right, because if you set it up wrong, then your work will be wrong. But if we keep going now, so on the outside it'll just be negative 2 plus or minus. Now inside the square root it'll be 4. And then now I'll do 4 times negative 3 times 7. That's going to be 84. And it's going to become positive 84 because if you notice here, we have minus a negative, so it's going to become plus now. Then on the bottom, we'll have negative 6. So keep going here. So negative 2 plus or minus. You can use a calculator, of course, for this, for all the squaring and multiplying. So here 4 plus 84 is going to be 88, and then it's going to be over negative 6 still. So 88, I could factor that, see if I can square root anything. So I can do 4 and 22, then 2 and 11, and then 4 is 2 and 2. So we can take something out. We have a pair. So on the outside, we'll have a 2. What's left over is the 2 and 11, so I'm going to just put that as 22. So here we get this. I'm going to simplify a little bit because I could divide these numbers here, the 2's and the 6's. So if I simplify this completely here, what I'll end up getting is negative 1 plus or minus, I'm going to put the 1 here, and then square root 22 over negative 3. So you could put your answer like that. You could also divide by the negative here. This would also be acceptable. But either one works. The bottom one is preferable because it has less negatives, less signs, but the top one is still correct. All right, and then the last one here. So this one also is also in standard form. So everything's on one side even though it's equal to 0. So this is fine. A is equal to 2, B is equal to 3, and then C is equal to 9. So set up the formula again. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. You might notice that I put parentheses around all the numbers I'm plugging in. That just is helpful for me to keep track of negatives or what exactly I'm plugging in. All right, so this is our setup. Now we just got to simplify. So negative 3 out in front, 9 there for 3 squared, and then 4 times 2 times 9, that's going to give us 72. And then here 2 times 2 on the bottom is 4. So negative 3 plus or minus the square root, what we'll get there is actually negative 68 and over 4. So I know I talked about it a little bit, but here to do the square root of a negative number, I'm going to break it down into the square root of negative 1 times 68. Then I'm going to square root or find the pairs for 68. So there's 2 times 34. And then for 34, there's 17 and 2. So there is a pair here with the 2's, so I could take that out. With the square root of negative 1, if you remember, it's going to be equal to I, and then I squared is going to be equal to negative 1. So this is just a fact you'll have to remember now that we could square root negative numbers. But again, square root of negative 1 is I. So what we'll have here is we're going to have negative 3 plus or minus, well, we have the 2 on the outside, and we also have the I from the negative 1. So what's left over? It's just that 17, so it's going to be 2I square root of 17, and it's all over 4. So this you could put as your final answer. You technically could simplify the 2 and the 4 here and write it like this, negative 3 over 4 plus or minus I square root 17 over 2. Know that I can't divide the 3 and the 4 or simplify that fraction, so I would have to leave it. But either one would be acceptable because if you think about which one's simpler, it's kind of a debate. So you could either leave it as the top or the denominator. Or not the top or denominator, the top answer or the bottom answer there. All right, and that's it for the quadratic video. There are a bunch of questions on the back side. So it says solve using any method. So you can use any of the methods that you know. Graphing might be a little difficult because there's no graph paper, but you could solve it using the square roots, quadratic formula, or factoring.